While I was away last week, we saw the return of Jay Monahan to his role as the commissioner of the PGA Tour. Monahan had taken a leave of absence for several weeks immediately following the announcement of the merger of the PGA Tour and Live Golf from the DP Tour. So we got the deal done, went on MSNBC and did a handful of other key interviews talking about how excited he was about the merger and the future of golf. He then started taking heat from his own PGA Tour players, many of whom felt betrayed by Monahan after the past year where Liv and the Saudis were painted as the bad guys, only to watch Monahan gleefully jump into bed with them by announcing this merger. So once all that was done, Monahan cited an unspecified health issue that saw him disappear for a few weeks. I was worried, thinking perhaps, geez, maybe this guy's having heart issues from the stress, or perhaps something even worse, a cancer diagnosis. I wasn't exactly sure, but I certainly had some sympathy and concern for Jay and hoped he was well. I was, however, just a tad skeptical at the timing of all of this. The guy's taking heat from all the major American sports pundits on TV and radio. You hear guys like Jim Rome and Colin Cowherd ripping him to shreds, as well as all the hot takers on ESPN. It seemed everyone was piling on Monahan. Jim Rome and Colin Cowherd, these are guys with, 300 plus radio stations heard all across North America. Guys that don't traditionally talk a lot of golf, were talking golf and just destroying Monahan. Well, it turns out the issue that kept Monahan away from his role for several weeks during the most important time in the history of the PGA Tour wasn't a physical health issue, but rather a mental health issue, with Monahan citing anxiety as the reason for his departure. This is a quote from Jay Monahan. Quote, "I was dealing with anxiety, which created physical and mental health issues and challenges for me," unquote, Monahan told reporters. This is according to ESPN. Monahan continues, "I needed to step away and deal with that and understand how to develop the skills to deal with that going forward," unquote, the 53-year-old Monahan added. Looks a lot older than 53. I didn't realize he was that young. Well, I posted this on my Twitter, and I had some people piling on saying, how dare you downplay anxiety and that it's a real issue for many people and all that. And I understand that. So then I posted a video on my Twitter in response and got several thousand views and a bunch of people retweeting it, where I explain that there's no person on this planet who understands anxiety and depression more than me. I've experienced anxiety and deep, dark, nasty depression for many years. I was prescribed every single anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication for about 12, 13 years. I was caught in a horrible loop of pharmaceutical, just keep taking this. So what happens is, you go to the doctor, and I'm a former athlete, didn't really think much of it. I was just like, tape me up, doc, get me back in the game. I was, dealing with stress, anxiety. My world was crumbling around me. Didn't really think much of it. And so the doctor says, okay, cool, I'll prescribe you 50 milligrams of whatever, and Zoloft. That's a well-known antidepressant, which I took for a while. So you take the 50 milligrams, and then you go back in a couple of weeks and say, well, it's not really working too much. Okay, I'll put you on 75. So then you do that, it's feeling good. Well, it's starting to wear off after a few months. Good. We'll get you up to 100 milligrams. Then, this goes on for months on end. You keep going back. Well, I was feeling good. Now I'm not. So the doctor keeps upping the ante. And then at one point, I'm on 200 milligrams of this stuff. And I literally can't see straight while I'm driving in the middle of the day. Like, it feels like you're drunk driving because you're so, and I wasn't on any, alcohol or any other kind of drugs at the time. It was like just jacked up on these medications. And then what happens is, okay, the doctor says, okay, well, we'll take you off that. We'll try you on a new medication. You start at 50 milligrams, go to 75, 100, 150, 2. Next thing you know, again, within a year, you're back to 200 milligrams of this next new one. And again, there's all sorts of side effects that go on, whatever. And so this is a vicious cycle that goes on. And I was caught in this loop for 12 or 13 years. And trust me, I know the cycle of anxiety and depression all too well. However, there's certain jobs in life that when you sign up for them, you understand that they're going to be very stressful positions. These jobs, more often than not, pay much more than your average job. Just like Jay Monahan was and is as PGA Tour commissioner, where he's being paid a reported $9 million a year. I've seen anything from $8 million to $14 million. The most common number I saw was $9 million, so that's what I'm going with for right now. But I hate to break the news to you, but when you're the commissioner of the PGA Tour and you're being paid $9 million a year, you don't get to take a stress leave. This is not one of those jobs where you can do that. If you're a teacher, you work insurance, or definitely if you're a police officer or a paramedic, those are jobs that taking a stress leave is well beyond understandable. The things that police officers and paramedics and firemen see. I have several close friends that are police officers, got a buddy that's a paramedic. He's been on and off stress leave for years. He's told me some of the horrors he's seen, obviously scooping dead bodies off the street. I mean, that certainly is going to affect you. And obviously, you're a police officer, some of the stuff you see, the domestic violence, the crime, all of it could certainly take a toll on you. And understandable that if you need to take some time off for that, completely understandable. However, when you're paid $9 million a year and you're the commissioner of the PGA Tour, this is not one of those jobs where you get to take an anxiety leave. You need to quit and go find a less stressful job. This isn't a job where you get to take a stress leave. So for those that know, prior to working in media, I was an award-winning music agent and concert promoter representing Grammy and Juno-winning musicians, some of the biggest bands in the world. I represented bands like, Rihanna, the Black Eyed Peas, The Roots, Akon, 50 Cent, Busta Rhymes, the Wu-Tang Clan, hundreds more Canadian artists. I was Sean Desmond's agent, Classified, Cardinal Official, Maestro Snow, all those guys. I was the dude who put all their concert tours together all across Canada for many, many years. I worked for the biggest music agency in the country for a couple years, and then ran my own agency for about 12 or 13 years after. And the entire reason I'm here talking to you about golf on the radio is because the stress and the anxiety of the job of being an agent literally ate me alive, and I eventually had to quit. Okay, the stress of being an agent. So people go, oh, well, what's stressful about it? Okay, you ever bought a concert ticket and then the concert gets canceled or postponed and it sucks for you because maybe you booked a day off work or whatever and you're really looking forward to it? Well, you ever think about the guy that has to cancel all those dates, rebook the venues, rebook the travel, deal with lawsuits because shows are being canceled for maybe reasons that are a little dicey? I represented some of the biggest rappers in the world. Sometimes we had guys getting turned away at the border. And it's, you do all the paperwork for the main rapper and the people in his crew, and sometimes they bring another guy with them. I was doing one of the guys from G Unit, Young Buck of G Unit back in the early 2000s. I had a work permit. You used to need work permits. They stopped that in about 2014, but going back to the early 2000s, I had a work permit for 11 people. Well, they showed up to the border with 16 people on a tour bus, and, the other 5 guys had criminal records as long as my arm. And so instead of just kicking those guys off the bus saying, hey, man, we got to go work, the entire tour group said, well, we're not going. And so concert dates canceled. I'm being sued. Lots of money's being owed, especially in hip-hop. Some of these guys don't go the sue route. They're gangsters. They'll show up knocking on your door saying, yo, where's the cash? And so all of this gets very, very stressful. Also, just the job itself, because clients, they want to dangle the fact that other agents are reaching out to them. Hey, man, well, Chris, if you're not doing your job too well, this other company from the agency group or PACAN agency, these are some of the agencies in Canada, they've been talking to us and they want us to jump ship over there. So if this tour doesn't go that way, and so they're constantly dangling that carrot that they may leave. And that's very stressful and creates anxiety. Like, I don't want to lose this client, because then your bosses look at you like, hey, why are you losing clients? And so what happens is then you book what you believe is an almost perfect concert tour. It's great. Well, maybe that one show in Ottawa doesn't sell the way the show in Toronto, Montreal did because of 1,000 different reasons. Maybe the weather wasn't that day, or maybe there's another big show that week, or maybe it's exam week, in a certain city or university, and so kids don't want to go to concerts. Well, there's 1,000 different reasons why concerts will go, but the artists themselves will never look themselves in the mirror and say, well, that show didn't sell because I'm not as hot as I used to be. My song, I had a number one hit 2 years ago. Maybe I don't. Another number one hit 10 years ago. I don't. They will never look themselves in the mirror. Well, that show didn't sell because I'm not as good as I am. It's always someone else's fault. And 99 times out of 100, it ends up being the agent's fault. Hey, well, that show sucked because you put us in the wrong club. And no, you suck is what the reason why. You can't say that to them. So again, all this stress ends up eating you alive. And it's always the agent's fault. And so, I had to walk away from that job because the stress and anxiety was killing me, just like it's happening to Jay Monahan. Don't you think I still want access to every concert and festival across the country? I could go for free to any single concert and festival, nightclub, anywhere in this country when I was an agent. Don't you think I miss going to the Juno Awards and other important music industry parties and hanging out with rock stars and rappers? I've had beers with like Ed Sheeran, all the guys from the Wu-Tang Clan. And it's like, you don't think I miss that? Don't you think I miss dating 25-year-old models? and having access to women that very few others, my friends that are cops and teachers, they don't have access to the women that I did when I was, a music agent, a concert promoter. However, it got to the point where the stress of the job and the effects of the antidepressant medication were eating me alive. You ever listen to those pharmaceutical commercials on TV? And at the end of the commercial, they list off 30 side effects of the medication really quickly. May cause anxiety, depression, it could cause cancer, it could cause heart disease, da, da, da. And especially with the antidepressants, they'll tell you at the end, could make you more suicidal, might make you more anxious. They're giving you a medication that's supposed to cure that, but more often than not, it ends up inflaming it and making the depression, anxiety 1,000 times worse. It's crazy. All of that drove me into the ground, into a deeper, dark depression, until I finally had the courage to say, enough. I can't do this job anymore. This job is literally killing me. Yes, this job has some great perks that very few other jobs out there have, but I can't take this anymore, and it's time to walk away from it and do something else. You don't think Jay Monahan gets some pretty sweet perks as commissioner of the PGA Tour? I'm guessing he's got memberships to some of the most exclusive golf clubs in the United States, gets to fly around on private jets, staying in 5-star hotels everywhere all across the United States. He gets invited to A-list parties in New York and LA and Miami, gets to hobnob with Tiger Woods and plenty of other celebrities, not just in the golf world, other, music and athletes. They're all at these PGA Tour events, and I'm sure, Jay doesn't want to walk away from that. In spite of all that, I hate to break the news to you, Jay. Now that he's back as the commissioner of the PGA Tour, this job isn't going to get less stressful. Your anxiety isn't going to magically just disappear tomorrow because you took a month away. The job will become 100 times more stressful because now you got to play catch up, right? It's like, well, you're gone for a month. Well, there's a million other things piled up on the desk. Things weren't getting done. So when you get back, then that anxiety almost becomes tenfold because you're behind. You're already behind and stressed out. And so now it's just going to get worse. So all of this says to me two things. Number one, Jay Monahan needs to quit and step down as the commissioner of the PGA Tour, because if he's dealing with anxiety, this job's not going to it's not going to get better tomorrow. It's just not. It's going to get worse. Or number two, he's lying about the anxiety, and he simply used that as an excuse to help ease the pressure of the negative media attention being directed his way. If the answer is one, that the anxiety is real, and I certainly have compassion for Jay. I have to walk away from my dream job and try something else. It's been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I'm a music industry lifer. I'm constantly on the hunt for new cool bands and rappers and DJ. That's never stopped. I'm not one of those old guys that just listens to Led Zeppelin and thinks they know something about music. I listened to Howard Stern for years, also like Dan Patrick, another sports guy. And keep in mind, these guys are 10,000 times the broadcaster I ever will be. But the two of them always, both Stern and Dan Patrick, always talk about how they're music guy. Oh, I'm a music guy. I'm a big music guy. And then they'll sit and talk about Led Zeppelin for 20 minutes. And, they couldn't mention a single new band or a single new singer or a single new rapper. Nothing. All they do is talk about Led Zeppelin and whatever, Pearl Jam. And it's like, I hate to break the news to you. You might have been a music guy 30, 40 years ago, but you are no longer a music guy if you want to talk music and then you go into classic rock and Led Zeppelin. It's like, no. Tell me someone new. Tell me someone new that's hot. Someone new that's cool. I still love music deeply, but also understand for the sake of my health and happiness that it was time to leave the job of being an agent, a concert promoter. So if that's what Jay's going through, then I certainly feel for him. But, and again, this is a big but, if he's lying about the anxiety and the depression and all that and just using it as an excuse, another well-crafted public relation move to kind of ease the pressure from all that negative media attention, well then Jay Monahan is an even bigger piece of garbage than anyone ever thought he was, certainly me. If he's using anxiety as an excuse, it's a spit in the face to those of us who've experienced it and had to live with it. Obviously I have no evidence of what the truth is in this situation. But if you want my gut feeling on all of this, Jay Monahan is lying about the anxiety and just needed a break from the intense media pressure and let it blow over and boil away, which it now has. And to me, that's just simply gross and unforgivable, which is just another in a long line of reasoning of why it's time that Jay Monahan steps down as commissioner of the PGA Tour. Don't forget, drop me a follow on Twitter at Mr. McKee and subscribe to This Week in Golf in podcast form on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever it is you prefer to listen to your podcast. I'm Chris McKee, and you're listening to This Week in Golf on Newstalk Sauga 960.